All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Bryan and Laura Laing. We're at Hazelfern Cellars in Newburgh. It's December 17th, 2019. Thank you both so much for joining us today. We appreciate this.
Thanks for having us.
Most important question is the one we start with, which is why wine?
That's always a great question. We love wine. We started, I guess we really kind of fell in love with drinking wine and kind of how that brought people together. Folks that, could be a random Tuesday night dinner with a spouse or a friend, and just the sort of conversation that would ensue, or it was just something that really brought people together. And then you come from sort of a family that really appreciates wine.
Yeah. I grew up in a family that really appreciates wine, specifically my aunt and uncle who live in Beaverton. And when I graduated from college, I went to University of Redlands down in Southern California, and after graduation had moved back up to Oregon and was working at Nike. And my first summer there was living with my aunt and uncle in Beaverton. And they have an amazing wine cellar, and so we were just pulling bottles and having great meals every night with just delicious wines, just meeting new friends. And at that time I was new to Portland. I grew up in Bend, so I was new to the Portland area, so didn't know a lot of people, and so wine was a great way to meet new people, through living at my aunt and uncle's house. And they have a long-standing wine tasting group that's been meeting here in Oregon for over 40 years now. That meets once a month and does blind tastings of just different. One month will be like Cab Sauv, or the next month will be wines from Germany, or whatever. They just go through and study different wines blindly. And in that group are some original folks from Oregon. So we have Marge, who was one of the founders of Oak Knoll, was in that group. And the Kramers, so Keith and Trudy Kramer, were in that group, and so I started attending that on a monthly basis, and just kind of kept falling in love with wine from there. I'll add to that I had taken a class my senior year of college called the History of Wine. So I graduated in business and marketing, but at Redlands, you have a first semester and a second semester, and then you have a May term, which is the third one. You just take one class for 1 month. And so my senior year going out, I took a class called the History of Wine, which was really wine tasting. Sure. It was fantastic. It was like this great way to get into, for 4 hours a day, we would literally, study a specific grape or study a specific region of the world. And so, that kind of really just set up that mindset coming out of college when I moved in with my aunt and uncle and started working at Nike and attending this wine tasting group. So that's how I originally fell in love with it. So through family.
Yeah.
So what were you doing before wine? What was your pre-wine background?
So both Bryan and I actually worked together. We were both in retail marketing. We worked for an agency in Portland where through our love of wine, we also had the opportunity where we got to travel a lot. So, and we actually got to travel together. We had sort of different teams, different projects, but those projects would always lend themselves to being in the same cities at the same time. So I would say it was an amazing dating life with an expense account. And so we worked together, and then through Bryan's aunt and uncle, when we started dating, he had me join in on this wine tasting group. And admittedly, I knew nothing about wine. I grew up in a family that loved wine, but didn't really know anything about it. And so it was just a fun way to learn and really kind of start in just a very basic, unpretentious way, if that makes sense. So then I quickly sort of fell in love with kind of the love of wine and the love around the stories of wine and the people behind the wine. And then his family is actually the one that encouraged us that we should start all making wine. And so that's how we ended up into wine. But again, not with the intent of ever having a winery.
Well, tell me about that. Tell me about sort of taking your first steps into like the industry, making wine.
Yeah, so we started together making wine with my family. So my aunt and uncle and cousin and his wife, so aunt and uncle who live in Beaverton, their oldest son who lives here in Newburgh with his wife, and we started in '06 making wine literally out of garages and basements. And just kind of grew every year after that. So we literally started with just a little quarter barrel of wine. The fruit was, we were super lucky to get a Heritage Block Pinot Noir from the Kramers, which is their original planting on the site. So right after that, we had like this incredible old school fruit. And and just started dabbling. My cousin went to UC Davis. He's a scientist by day, and took some enology and viticulture courses while at Davis. And his day job is he manufactures he does genetic work. So he has a lab in Tigard and manufactures synthetic DNA and sells it to companies like Pfizer, so he'll swap out different genes, things like that. So you have this real science background, which is not something that we had at all. We approach it more from like an arts and blending and like food side of it. And so it was really kind of the combination of our entire family working together, learning how to make wine. So that was 2006. We took the 2007 vintage off of making wine and actually planted my cousin's vineyard on Parrot Mountain in Newburgh.
And at the time, we literally hand planted. So we dug every hole, and that's where we kind of learned from a hand's length, the viticulture side. So we loved the art of it, so we would help, and that's really kind of when we learned how to take care of the plants.
Yeah.
Were there any steps in the process that were either surprising to you or that were unpleasant, or was it all just kind of like, oh, I really like this, I want to do more?
I don't know.
I mean, I'll speak for myself. So from like a winemaking standpoint, we made wine with the family all the way up through 2010, and if we're being really honest, what that meant is it was really being led by my cousin. So he was the one that had taken, this work at Davis. He was the science, guy. It was, he was the one leading the direction. And then in 2010, his vineyard came online. And at that point, we were still getting our grapes from the Kramers. He now had his own vineyard. And so kind of as a friendly, almost family competition, we kind of separated into three parties to start, making wine on our own.
And I'll interject and say Bryan is really competitive. So that's really where things took a different spin for us.
Yeah, and so 2011 was like our first year on our own making wine. So I mean, we had been making it as a family, but halfway paying attention. Like you just didn't know. I didn't understand all the science side still to learn that. And so did 2011 and then the 2012 harvest. And I can remember after 2012, I was like, I think I'm good. Winemaking is not really my thing. Like I prefer just to drink it. It seemed like so much work, and that's so funny to look back on now because we were just doing like 2 quarter barrels of wine, like a couple carboys. Like that's compared to what we do now. To feel like, oh my gosh, this is so much work. Like this is just not for me. And so I left the 2012 vintage thinking like, that was a fun hobby for a while, and we're not going to do that again. But the competitive juices kicked in, and so then I was like, oh man, okay, like the 2012, like that actually turned out pretty good, and so now I want to come back and compete. And so in 2013, it was like back in the game, and like from the 2013 vintage, like all in. Like I think things clicked for me, and it became much more enjoyable, and have been all in ever since that point. No one's ever heard that story.
It's true.
Yeah.
No.
This is the very detailed side. It doesn't. This doesn't get like rolled up in our
I know.
content.
I think the part of me of like what I usually tell in tasting room, all this feels a little bit against that. Where I'm like, I don't love making wine, and I don't think I ever will. The technical side of it and the amount of work, which is funny how he says, going back in time, that seemed like a lot of work. That wasn't a lot of work. Compared to now. But I think when I remember it clicking for Bryan, I remember you were sitting in the kitchen of our house in Northeast Portland, which is where we lived, and I remember like something changed that harvest, and then we had sort of our family competition where all of our friends and family came, and Bryan was so stressed. He's like, I have to win.
This is a tasting competition?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all the families wine.
All the different families, like all of our parts of the family have made our own wine.
And it was like unanimous among all the family and friends that the wine that we had made was the winner, hands down.
Yeah, and my family is also very good winemakers. Like there was, because I'm competitive, there was like politicking, and like, I was trying to win votes, and then like when they took the vote at the end of the day, everyone was like chanting Hazelfern, and we literally came up with our name, I think, like that week.
Day.
Yeah, because we wanted to put some labels on it, and it was our 2013. That was our first. No, not our first vintage. That was the vintage for that competition, and so we.
Do we have the 13 out here?
Not out here right now.
Okay.
But
we printed on the printer, put it on the bottle.
Made up our packaging.
Yeah. We put together our whole plan around it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so then we won that competition, among the family, and so like that. I don't know. And again, I really loved making that vintage, and I've really loved it ever since then. It was just up until 2012 that it was like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this, because I was, again, 11 and 12 were the first times on my own. And it was, that was a big adjustment.
Totally different vintages too. Yeah.
Do you have an idea obviously competitive nature, I understand that personally. Do you have any idea besides that, if there was something else about it? Did you feel something about 13 that was special to you, or something about the process that year that was special to you?
No, I think it was just that third year that things clicked, and so it became easier. I remember starting in 2011 and again approaching it as an artist, but not knowing all the chemistry side of it yet on my own. And so making decisions in the winemaking, trying to take a lot of risks to make this incredible wine, and things that either worked or didn't work, and it was just very, very frustrating. Pinot Noir is very hard to make and do good, and so it was challenging. That especially 11, that was a challenging vintage to be on our own, and then on top of that, taking a whole bunch of risks again, because I just wanted to make like the best Pinot Noir ever. And so I learned, and coming out of 2012 and coming into 2013, that's when I was like, I had made a decision. Okay, I'm going to do this again in 13. And again, when I go in on something, like I'm all in. And so I was like, reading textbooks from Davis and like just getting super jazzed about that 13 vintage. So I think that it's because I had committed at that point that I was all in. That combined with things really started to click. The chemistry made sense. I learned lessons, starting in 06, but then really learned lessons in 11 and 12 when I was doing it on my own.
On our personal side of things, we had a baby in 11 and a baby in 13.
Just for added complication.
Just add that in there. But we have such great memories. I do of having the babies in the front pack, or trying to get babies to naturally want to come out by picking thousands and thousands of pounds of fruit and carrying it up and down the rows. And that was our 13 baby. I think I picked like 2,000 pounds of fruit, hoping that I would have a natural birth. She didn't want to come out. But then weeks later, being back in the front pack with just out in this world. So we used the picking bins for years as their little playpens out in the different vineyard sites. But that's aside from our story.
I love it.
Behind the scenes.
Tell me about this site then. How do you get from, you started winemaking in Northeast Portland, how do you get here?
So,
do you know the name, first of all, like where that name came from?
Yeah, so Hazelfern is a Portland name. So the area of Portland that we lived in, it used to be called Hazelfern Farms in the late 1800s. It was a Jersey cow farm owned by William Ladd, so Ladd's Addition. He was the first mayor of Portland. That area, which is now Laurelhurst area. So we lived over there. We had day jobs, we had family, we had lots going on. So we would bring our fruit home. So we would do a lot out here, but we couldn't be driving back and forth in the midst of harvest with jobs and the kids to be coming to do punch downs and different things. So the area of Portland we lived in, Laurelhurst. We happened to live on Hazelfern Street all those years. And so we would bring our fruit home to that site and make our wine in the basement and in the garage. Our fermentation style really was informed by being able to We didn't have any fancy equipment there, so we had to be able to use our basement and the sun to heat and cool. So we had to be small enough that things we could move in and out of the basement frequently. And yeah, it's kind of just where our name came from. We liked the name a lot because it was kind of a tie to our Portland roots, kind of where all of this started. And it was something that you could say, and you didn't need, a lot of practice with the enunciation of it. And we thought that would be important as we went down this path. I always say it was perfect balance of arrogance and ignorance to say we're going to start in this kind of, it's like the Grammys when you see some of these old time winemakers who are famous to us, right? So we just thought that'd be important of being able, not also having the barrier of how do you say their name, of just it being Hazelfern. So that's where our name comes from. And then, so for years, this was our pipe dream. One day we were going to do this. We didn't know when day would actually be the case. And then you can, I guess, talk about your cousin.
Yeah. So in March of 2014, we had, again, I really had been making wine, since 06 and then on our own since 11. And then, kind of fast forward to March of 2014, I had a young cousin who was over living in Hawaii in her 20s. She had beaten cancer at age 18, so she understood that life is really, really short. Was off pursuing her dream, working for her first day for an organic farm in Honolulu, and her job that day was to set up for their farmers market. So. When you're setting up for a farmer's market, there's like all the tents and such in the farmer's market. So she was in her tent setting up when a delivery truck came over the curb and went through her tent and killed her. And so we got that. It was super tragic, again, completely unexpected. We were hiking Multnomah Falls when we got that phone call letting us know that. And we went and sat down in Edgefield out in Troutdale right after that. And that's where we made the decision. We talked about how life is so short, and you should go out and pursue your dream, and don't, what are you waiting for? And so literally 2 months later, we had found this property that we're at now, and as soon as we walked into the barn that we're at now, we kind of knew like this was a special spot, a spot that we wanted it to be. We really like this part of wine country, so we love the Chehalis Mountains. We loved still being close to Portland. This is one of kind of the gateway from Portland into the valley, and so we coming from Portland, we still want to be connected to Portland. It's so close to Portland, and so we found this barn, but then also knew that we have such historic vineyards up here. The Medici vineyard that's right here, one of those original vineyards, especially here in the Chehalis Mountains. So we knew that we had the right soil type, like the right area for growing grapes on the property, and then we just felt like the barn, we just had a vision for making the wine here and hosting people at some point. And so literally that was 2 months after that accident happened that we packed up everything and went for it. And so that was heading into the 2014 vintage.
Sure.
Which now looking back does sound absolutely nuts. Our parents were like, what are you guys doing? Our family was very concerned. But I think it's one of those things where, you just don't know until you know, right? I remember the first week we moved onto the property, I think I was like bawling, and I was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like, this is crazy. But
yeah, it was just overwhelming. The property was it was a horse property. The barn was built as you see it for 4 horses by the family that lived here before us. They spent 3 years building this barn. They did a stunning job. All of the woodwork, all the floor drains, all the stuff was here. It was for the animals. They spent 3 years doing it, and then right when they finished it, they got relocated to the East Coast for work. So the barn never had an animal inside of it. So it's only been used for winemaking, but the property was a horse property. So all the fencing that was out there, the corrals, there was just a lot of prep to do. And we were city people. We had no idea, like what. I can remember we went in, we got a tractor, and the place that we got the tractor from came and brought it, and they dropped it off and gave us the keys, and they were like, oh, congratulations. And literally we had to stop and ask them, like, how do you turn it on? Like, we didn't know anything. And so it was overwhelming. Just that first year, just how you even mow the grass on a property, it was just such a change for us.
Yeah. So it's crazy to think how far we've come.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we have
Did you?
a lot of acreage.
Did you? I mean, you talk about being overwhelmed. Did you ever think we're going back? Where this isn't for us?
I don't think that's our mentality. I mean, I think that we both go through moments here and there where we feel overwhelmed, but it's kind of like an obstacle is just an obstacle, and you just find a way to go around it. I think that's just who we are. We're both kind of, it's funny, my off the beaten path story is that Bryan and I both took these like tests years ago where, it tells you about your personality. And both of us register off the charts for what's called our internal battery, that we just go. And I think that's just kind of the core of who we are. But usually we do always crash too. Just usually not at the same time, which is good. Yeah.
It's a lot of it too is our background. How we met was, when I graduated from college, I was working at Nike, and then shortly after that, I started working for a retail marketing agency. So retail marketing meaning like all store build outs, physical retail stores, events that happen in stores, and that's where Laura and I met working at that agency. And so our shared client was Nike, and so that there's Nike has a winning mentality. They refuse to lose, and they do big, exciting things. And so we have this background of doing incredible projects for incredible brands where there's no going back and there's no failing. And we would always joke, it's like Nike could call you one day and say, hey, we want to have an event tomorrow in downtown Portland. And LeBron James is going to be there, and by the way, it needs to be completely permitted and things like that. And they would be like, and you're going to get it done, and we would get it done. And so we just come from that background and love those challenges, like the impossible challenges. And we were always just trained. We talk about it all the time that our past career prepared us so well for this industry. Things like harvest, we have just a mountain of fruit coming in. Like there's no option. Like you have to go through it, and it's like there's no, you can't sit around and be a victim to that fruit. Like you're going to tackle it and get it done. And so we were fortunate to kind of grow up in a culture and a company that really taught us a lot of those skills. And mentality. It's a mentality.
I really like the term "victim of the fruit." I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, that's right.
That's excellent. So tell me about you talk about the challenges and the kind of the learning curves. Tell me about the first couple of years. What did you have to do? What needed to be done, and what did you have to learn?
Oh man, so much. I think that's where my comment, and I'll stand by this, is the ignorance and a little bit of arrogance. You don't know what you don't know until you're in it. And I think that's, the licensing process, the building process, I think the biggest things that we've had to learn are just, we didn't come from, a large winemaking facility. We kind of came kind of the opposite way. And so what we've had to learn is how do we scale, and how do we scale independently, being cognizant of capital and things like that are not free flowing. And so how do you build something, and how do you continue to grow, and then how do you do that, one, organically, but also with your investments and things being something that you'll be able to utilize in 10 years from now, not knowing what we're going to need in 10 years from now. So it's been just, I think that's the fun challenge of it, but also kind of the taking one day at a time, and knowing enough to be dangerous, but we're also the first to say we don't know everything. And so we'll ask for help, and I think we've been fortunate. We have a lot of great business mentors who've been very encouraging and helpful of us, and helping us, lead us when we kind of feel like we don't know what maybe the solution would be.
Yeah, but I think that's also it's been our advantage to not know a lot. Like that's actually been helpful, you know. And I can remember early on here in the barn, you know, winemakers that grew up in bigger systems coming in, you know, to tour the space and, you know, saying, you know, they look around and they're like, well, where's all your equipment? How do you, what? Like, what do you mean you guys are making wine in here? And so, but we didn't know. Like, we don't know because we never, you know, we were never trained formally in a winery. And so we didn't know what we were missing. We just knew that we were kind of scaling up, you know, really our basement operation. And I think that's actually been a huge lucky win for us because it's forced, you know, it's made a good business. Like we like Laura said, we don't have a lot of capital. We're not, you know, we've grown in very small batches. It still informs our style today. And so, you know, I think that it's been a huge part of what's made Hazelfern so far, both stylistically, but then also from a business standpoint, being a healthy business.
Tell me about the property outside the barn. Excuse me, as you put in grapes and you looked for what you wanted to plant. How did you kind of decide what you were going to grow, what you were going to make?
This is the best story. I remember sitting at the kitchen counter and we were like, we have to place our order like the next day for our vines.
Yeah, you had to order them like a year out.
And, you know, of course we were going to plant some Pinot Noir and, you know, we were kind of thinking we would just plant all Pinot. And somehow I think Bryan honestly crowdsourced the idea to our friends, what should we plant? And we got some really great suggestions back. Things from super left field that obviously would never do well here to some really unique things that we probably never really had given the great amount of consideration. And so I'll let you tell them what we planted.
Yeah, we planted Pinot Noir, 6 different clones on 3 different rootstocks. We planted Gamay Noir, 1 clone. And those are the 2 varieties that we knew that we wanted to plant when we came here. And then we planted Trousseau Noir as well. And that's the variety that we crowdsourced on Instagram. Literally, that night.
And so we planted it on the far end of the property because at the time when we planted it in 2015, the only other planting that we were aware of, well, there's 2, was Jason's at Irene, and then Amaro.
I don't know that they had planted it yet. At that
But
point,
they were
we had to order
making
the plants.
some.
They were about to, and there was a vineyard in Southern Oregon, and I don't know their name, that had Trousseau. And those were the only 2 in Oregon at that time that we were aware of, at least.
So I was thinking this might not be a good idea. So maybe we should plant this at the far end of the property. So if we have to rip it all out, at least it won't be an eyesore at this side of the property.
I think there was talk of it in the Valley, Trousseau. There was talk because that's why it popped through. Like people were like, "Oh, this is, you know, Jason had planted it. He started, you know, seeing success with his first vintage at that time, and so people were excited about it. Obviously, Jason knows what he's doing, and so that was okay. That's good. And then you could see quickly that people were really interested in what this was going to become. And so, you know, we started to fall in love with Trousseau from the Jura in France after getting that idea from Instagram, because it's a pretty obscure grape variety. And so we ordered it, and now we have 3 different clones of Trousseau here on the property, and just actually got our first harvest from that in 2018 and made our first wine that we released a couple weeks ago. And we are in love with it. And those 3 varieties together, Pinot Noir, Gamay Noir, and Trousseau Noir, we just co-fermented one blend, one statement for the entire property. And it's been amazing how well those varieties have worked together.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
Credit to also, you know, speaking of wine history, credit to Chad Stock, who was at Minimus, who had the Omero Vineyard at the time when we did that planting, and he came out to our grand opening. And I remember when he released his first Noir, which was that blend of those Pinot Noir, Gamay Noir, and Trousseau Noir. I remember that he called me and said, "Hey, you need to get down to the winery and try this." You know, he's like this, and so I drove down there and tried the Noir, and he explained why he, you know, thought that those 3 worked so well together. And he said when he was making that wine, he had thought of our planting here, and that we probably had the perfect proportion of grapes to make that exact same wine, and that could be a great statement for Oregon in the future. And so that was before our first harvest, and so we went into that inspired by, you know, kind of his leadership in that space, and made our first Noir.
It's cool. We attended, so the Beckhams were really interested in planting some Trousseau, and so they led, I can't remember which year it was, just a gathering of folks kind of focused and excited about planting Trousseau. So we went up to their place, and the only Oregon Trousseau that we'd had to date, Jason brought, was his 14, and he just released his 15. So we got to try those, and it was, such a cool experience. And it was neat because right after we left that night, Jason put on his Facebook account, he said it was very surreal being, meeting with folks who were planting totally obscure, varietals. And he likened it to being a kid when he would go and attend with his parents. He said it was so weird bringing his daughter to this as an adult, sort of where, maybe some future of where maybe Oregon will go in the future. But also kind of a homage to the past of doing the same thing with his parents, and how his parents didn't really know what they were doing with Pinot, and if they hadn't, where would we be today, right? So it was just a really, really awe-inspiring moment, which was really cool. So we gifted our Trousseau vines to the Beckhams.
The cuttings.
I can't remember what year we did that. So they now have the same Trousseau that we have on this property.
In addition to others, which is exciting. Some more clones in the valley, which is great.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun.
Instagram to that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that. Tell me about as you were obviously you came here. You had already established kind of what you were going to do in terms of your roles. But tell me, as you're growing, how you'd sort of define what you each were going to do in the business as you grew.
That is a excellent question. We're working on that. So we've grown a lot faster, I think, than we had initially ever expected to, which is a huge blessing. It also creates a lot of growing challenges. And so I think we're kind of right now trying to decide where we're going, and therefore what our roles will be, and therefore who we hire to help us. So we're in this amazingly exciting crossroads time, but also very scary. And there's obviously many that have gone before us that have come out the other side. So it's exciting to look around and say, okay, well, they all made it. But it's also it can be very daunting when it's just you guys and it's just us that really kind of, all the decisions land with us. But for the most part, we pretty much wear every hat. I mean, you kind of have to. I think as time goes on, I'll probably step out more of winemaking and I love sort of blending, but I'll probably step more out of winemaking. I don't know.
Yeah, I lead winemaking in the vineyards. So we have our estate vineyard here, and then lease some other vineyards in the valley, and then have different blocks in other vineyards that we contract year over year. And so that's where I spend most of my time. I'm also in charge of the marketing, so I think social media marketing driven is what I absolutely love to do. And so that was my love before wine, and so I still love doing that. And so I take the lead on that, and Laura is the lead on
kind of all the business stuff.
Yeah. Accounting,
hospitality, sales. I don't know. I feel like kind of anything that kind of lands in every other bucket is kind of things that I kind of handle. So there's a lot of different things that every day kind of challenges, but also opportunities. So, but we also kind of we don't necessarily stay in our lanes. We both help in both sides. Yeah.
Tell me about selling wine. Obviously, you come from a background of marketing and events, and you have that. But selling wine, I know, is a different beast. So tell me about selling wine, especially as you've grown.
Yeah, I think we've been very fortunate. We to date have been 100% DTC, which is direct to the customer, here in the tasting room. So all by appointment, and that's kind of been my forte. We just, as of this last, I guess within the last couple of months, we, have been, again, really fortunate where we've had other key markets outside of Oregon really have an interest in our wine and carrying it, but we haven't had the bandwidth to support it from a wine standpoint or a personnel standpoint. And so we've actually just hired our first employee. And so
Congratulations.
Which is very exciting. And so she's really kind of taking off that piece of it. And it's interesting, that's something we know nothing about. We know nothing about distribution. We know nothing about really, I don't, about selling wine outside of, honestly, this physical space. And so that's been a really interesting challenge in terms of learning about the legal side of things and the licensing state to state. So I'm really grateful that we kind of have her to help lead that charge. Yeah.
Yeah, we're literally back to the same way that we got into wine, which is reading books right now on wine distribution. And,
Yeah.
Scouring the internet and talking to people we don't. It's a completely different business that we are completely new to. So we're excited to tackle it, although it's a completely new journey for us.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
We kind of feel fortunate that this is, we just have known what we've known here, and we've enjoyed. I've enjoyed not having to tackle it yet.
Yeah.
So
I do think that as far as selling wine related to marketing, we have a unique background that's helped us. So from the standpoint of coming from a retail marketing position, which is delivering consumer experiences, it happens to be a really good time for that, just given the current marketplace. And then secondly, we come from the footwear business. So Laura and I have managed launches for some of the best footwear brands in the world, huge high-profile launches, and I love to tell people this, and people often laugh when I say this.
this is the most controversial thing he'll ever say. Some people do not like hearing this in the wine industry. I'll put that out there.
But it's true that wine is just like shoes, and we in the wine business we love our wine. We're very geeked out on it, but for the general consumer out there, that most consumers don't know about clones and things like that. So that's for me. My viewpoint is we are expected to make great wine. Like, that's where it starts with our culture at Hazelfern. Like, we always have to make great wine. That's checking the box, right? That's required. That's expected. But as far as how you market it, it's very much like footwear. So when we take it out to market, we view it as a commodity. And you add value to that commodity through the storytelling and the value that you add, the way you inspire people's lives beyond the clone or the juice that's in the bottle. And so that is the same way that Nike packages up a shoe. Because when you walk, think of you walk into a Nike Town or a Dick's Sporting Goods or a Foot Locker, and it's a sea of shoes, and you have all these choices, and it's very much like the aisle when you go into the grocery store. There's a sea of labels on that wall. And to the general consumer, most of those are just commodities. And what stands out is those that they connect to in kind of a deeper way, rather than just the technical specs or what's in the bottle. And so we grew up in a footwear business that really understood that, and it's actually the exact same thing, just two different products.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you connect then with the consumers? You mentioned experience, obviously a big part of it. If you're selling your wine mostly face to face, what do you want customers to get out of the Hazelfern experience?
I think that people connect with us a lot in terms of, just kind of following your dream and going after something that you want. We connect with people, in terms of, most people coming in here have, they have a love of wine. So, check, I think we make great wine. But just kind of the other aspects of it. I actually don't spend much time talking about the wine when I'm pouring the wine. And, I'll give the basics, but, it's really about connecting with people and connecting with their story. Why are they here? How did they come to find us? And I think that's kind of the meat of it for me. I'll never lead you through a technical tasting. I can, but it's just not where my conversation usually ends up going.
I think, and from my standpoint, it's going back to from a storytelling and marketing standpoint. I can remember hearing a speech one time where a woman who was, this is gonna be like totally off the topic.
That's okay.
There was a woman who had rebranded the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and so she was there giving a speech on how you rebrand and add brand value to a museum, so something like that, an institution. And she asked the question, and she said, what do people, when we're talking about brands versus products, what are people saying about your brand when you're not in the room? And is your brand inspiring deeper meaning in their lives and an emotional connection? And if it's not, then you're probably just a product at this point. And she said it, and honestly, most things out there are actually just products, and there's not a lot of brands. And so I came back from that, and we started talking about, like with Hazelfern, why at this point, this was like a couple years into Hazelfern, and so I was wondering, like, why is Hazelfern resonating with people, and why are we seeing people post the bottles on Instagram and stuff? And I think that we came to realize that the Hazelfern brand, when we're not there and on the Thanksgiving table, someone brings a bottle of Hazelfern, they're not necessarily talking about it's 777 clone Pinot or what's in that glass. What they're talking about is that Bryan and Laura had this quarter life crisis and up and left their corporate jobs and went for it, and so far to date have made that work. And that I think that is the flag that Hazelfern stands for. It's an inspiration. You can do this. You can go off and pursue your dreams and do what you love to do, and that's what we stand for. And I think that's what Hazelfern stands for, and ultimately that is our brand. Hopefully people love the wine, but what that label stands for is that pursuing your dream, life is short.
And I think also, normally not today because we're a video on, but like the music's loud, and the experience of Hazelfern is who we are, and so we're not trying to be anything else other than authentically us, and so we won't resonate with everybody, and that's okay. We don't have to. We are who we are, and we're making this wine to be representative of who we are.
Yep.
And I think that's the core of it, and I think that we really understand that. So there are some people that come in and we are not their jam, and that's okay. They're not loud music, and they want to have a different experience that we can't provide, and there's so many folks that can provide that experience. So I think just the key that we always talk about is we're just being us.
Yeah,
and
we don't try and chase that experience. Like, we're not going to be all things to all people. When you come here, it's an authentic tasting experience in a barn. Like, it's a horse barn. You're like right now, literally, we're sitting inside of a horse stall, and we like to think it's a nice horse stall, but for some people that want a grander scene or experience, like, this is not going to be their jam, and we're 100% okay with that. And I think that's helped us a lot.
So I want to talk about the wine itself for a second here, and sort of your winemaking philosophy. Obviously, you kind of came into it a different route than a lot of people do, and you kind of learned as you went. So tell me, what do you want Hazelfern wine to be? What do you want people to get out of it? And maybe how has that changed since you started, if it has?
Yeah, we like to say that I don't know that we're kids anymore, but we like to say that we're new school kids making old school wines. So we're very inspired by the old world, obviously making wine here in Oregon. But I think, when I think about, especially Pinot Noir, we often talk about there's kind of an old world style, and then there's definitely like a West Coast style to Pinot Noir. And we're definitely inspired more by the old world style. We're inspired by food. We view wine as food on the table, something that connects people over a shared meal. We like wines that have great acidity, because that's almost like salt with food. It's what makes those pairings really, really pop. So everything that we do from a winemaking standpoint is, all of our ferments, we do it, pretty cool temperatures. We're not looking for big, heavy extraction. We're not looking for huge, jammy fruits. We're looking for acid-driven, old world wines that are amazing with food and have a whole bunch of elegance and complexity and layers. Texture is also very, very important to us.
How did you go about learning to make that kind of wine?
Reading, so reading, books from France and being inspired by those old world Pinot Noir makers, and then that translated to Chardonnay, which is our favorite wine to make, is Chardonnay. But again, just reading stylistically, deciding, those producers that we liked in France and seeing how they were making and approaching Pinot Noir. And then, of course, here in Oregon, we have, definitely different styles of wine being made. And so just talking to those winemakers that inspired us, again, more in that old world style.
I should interject here and say, on the Chardonnay note, when we started out, we had no intentions of making any Chardonnay. I don't think we had ever planned to. Maybe you did. I don't know. But now Chardonnay is hands down our favorite wine. And we make more Chardonnay than we do Pinot now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years on that. Yeah.
Also, I think stylistically, to go back to that question, we're not only inspired by the wines of the old world, but that's how when we're making wine in our basement, like we don't have equipment, like we don't have a way to force ferments to be hotter than they're going to be. When you're working in very small little food grade containers, you can only get them so warm. And so that was our style from the beginning, just by the nature of the things that we didn't have. And so that's that still informs our style today. So we still do everything by hand. We do things in very, very small lots. We keep those temperatures really, really low. We don't have you don't see big heating equipment in this place. Like we don't have that stuff. And so we work with what the vintage gives us, and we work with the temperatures here in the barn. Our barrel rooms are insulated in here, but the barn is not. And so many times, like 2017, that's a very cooler style vintage for us, because this barn was very, very cold in the end of October when we brought that fruit in. And so that tells the story of that vintage. It was almost like the barn outside of the barrel rooms really is a similar temperature, as you guys can feel in here today, as it is outside. So today it's cold outside and it's cold in here. And so that really affects our style each year as well.
So I'm curious also, you came to wine from an appreciation of the product first, and then into making. So why is wine important? What is wine to you now that you're in the industry? Well, if someone asked you why it's important to you, what would your answer be?
I think my answer is still what it was in the beginning, which is that it's this conduit of bringing people together. So my favorite thing is, we used to, in our Hazelfern house, that Northeast Portland, we'd sit out after the kids went to bed and open a bottle of wine in our back back deck and talk about life and talk about all sorts of random things. And it was just this thing that always brought people together. So whether it's just two of you, or it's all of your best friends, or it's a holiday event.
Or people who don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
As humans.
Yeah, it's just this sort of a leveler. So I would say consistently, what wine is to me today is what it was then. The difference now is that my favorite thing is that when people are drinking like our wine at Thanksgiving and posting about it, and coming in and telling me how what they were sharing with their family, and maybe their family is going through a hard time right now, and I don't know, it's exactly the same, but now I get to live in other people's lives and be part of that, which is really, really a unique thing, I think. Yeah,
and also, for me, it's something that connects people from around the world. And I remember, before we had ever released our 2014, like our first commercial vintage, we had met Maria and Rob Stewart of Our Stewart at a dinner down in Portland, actually. So it was this dinner that was at a house, and so randomly we end up at this very intimate dinner and sit next to Maria and Rob, and so shared with them, what our plans were. And they're fantastic people. They invited us over for dinner at their house in McMinnville, and I remember going out there and doing that. It was a nice summer evening, and they cooked this meal and shared their wines under their tree that's in their backyard. And there was some people from their wine club from Atlanta and other friends, and all these people would kind of come together for this dinner, just from all over that we had not met. And likewise, no one knew the other couples at the table. Everyone was kind of meeting for the first time. And I'll always remember that Maria said to us, she's like, it's such an exciting time for you guys to be coming into this industry. The Willamette Valley it's an exciting time for the valley. It's receiving worldwide recognition. People are coming from around the world to visit the vineyards and the wineries here. And as a couple, they have 3 kids that at that time I think were high school aged. And they said it's been an amazing industry and area of the world to raise their kids, and they were so excited for us to raise our 2 girls in this industry, because they said every week they're seeing people come from around the world who they can invite over to their house for dinner, and it allows their kids to have a worldwide view by meeting and having conversations all brought together by the shared language, which is wine. And so to me, that's what's really, really special about wine, and that's what I'm saying, it connects people from around the world over a shared meal. Like that's what it's all about.
Tell me about the industry that you came into. What was the Oregon wine industry like when you became a part of it, especially officially a part of it? And what does it look like now? Has it changed much? What was the welcome like for you as you came into it?
I think it's so interesting. I would be curious to, live a different life in a way where I had been already a part of it, and then decided, to start, because we came in as really kind of outsiders who didn't really know anything. We didn't know anybody. We kind of like little hermits where we didn't know anything that was going on. And, now, these are our people. This is our family. This is our chosen family, I should say. I can't imagine not being a part of this. It's just like this. Our children go to this small school, and it's just so fun when all the parents are show up for school pickup with the rain boots on, all covered in grapes, and it's just a really cool camaraderie. It's such I guess it would be like any farming town really, but there's just this really unique spirit of it. I don't know how to communicate that.
Yeah, and from my point of view, I feel like we're still like breaking into the industry.
Yeah.
We're still, because we came in and like Laura said, we're just like over here, we're like footwear people who love wine, making our own thing in the corner, and we don't know anyone in the industry. And it wasn't actually, I kept a full-time job until last fall down in Portland every day. So I was down there every day. We would come back during harvest, we would just work all night. So last year was our first time even doing harvest during daylight hours.
We didn't know about the yellow jacket.
We've just been like in our just own insulated world. And so now being here full-time, like we've had way more time to immerse ourselves into the industry, meet people, create those relationships, and like Laura said, it's fantastic. The people out here are fantastic. But really, I feel like this is kind of our first year, like really getting into it. And again, it's because we have full-time focus here, in the valley, which is awesome.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience. The first time we actually made wine during the day, that was really cool. Actually went to bed at a normal hour, but. This is our family, and we haven't even met everyone yet, and we don't even know, I think, even a small percentage of this industry. But I think that's what's really cool about it.
Yeah, we went to the Willamette Valley Wineries Association holiday party, which was a couple weeks ago, and I remember going there and thinking like, oh, this is so exciting, like this year we'll know some people.
Yeah.
And like we walked in and I was like,
nope.
I don't think we know anyone from like the McMinnville side. Like we knew Maria and Rob, and then I was like, I don't know anyone else in this room right now.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. So it was like all these amazing people that we got to meet, but it's just funny because it's just like I feel like we've gotten to know so many more people this year, and just really excited, for the years coming up. Just how many amazing people there are still to meet.
It's funny too because Bryan was nominated by the Willamette Valley Wineries Association board to be on the board, and so we went to the holiday party, and Bryan's like, I don't know anybody. We know like a few people here and there, but we still feel like people don't even know who we are,
Yeah, I feel like we've gotten to know this. There's kind of the different sides of the valley. There's South Valley. We're up here in like the Newburgh, closer to Portland side. So we know, like we have community, like very strong community out here. But that was exciting to go to that party and know that we just don't know a lot of people on the like McMinnville and South side yet.
being on the board will definitely change that in a hurry, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's so funny.
What do you see as you look ahead for Oregon wine now that you're full-fledged all the way in it? What is the industry going to look like in the next, say, 10 years?
I think it's really exciting. I think we're not even the tip of the iceberg here. The quality of wine, the quality of stories, the uniqueness of this area, kind of going back to everything we've just been saying, there's nothing really like it. And so I think that's why consumers and that's why people from all over the world want to come here, because there is no other place like it. I think that there are amazing wine regions, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of the full package. It's all of those things. It's the caliber of farming, the
Focus on sustainability.
Focus on, leaving this place a better place than when we found it. People really honing their craft and making that their priority. I don't think the financial aspect is really ever something that's the focus here in Oregon. It's about enriching people's lives, enriching people around them. We feel like, where we will be in 10 years, I can't even fathom, because where we've been in the last 10 years is totally different than where we are. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for Oregon because I think we're really well positioned in the marketplace for the next crop of wine consumers. So when you start talking about millennials and Gen Z and the kids that are coming up, I think that the small family stories that are here, the craft, the focus on sustainability, the mindsets, the way that Oregon is positioned is really, really well to continue to show strong growth compared to other regions, at least here in the United States, certainly. So I think that this is a region that's up next. Like the quality that's coming out of here is unbelievable. And so it's certainly an exciting time. I think that there's real focus from all the small wineries and growers like ourselves on that authentic story and the craft, and also I think that the large wineries that we have here now are also focused on that same quality. Like it's a really special time, and as I mentioned, I think we're well positioned for where the consumers are going to.
Well, Laura, you kind of ruined my next question by saying you don't know where you're going to be in the next. Well, you guys are going to be in the next 10 years. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
What do you hope for? Are there certain plans you have? Are there certain ambitions you have over the next decade?
Yes. I think that we've been so fortunate to get where we are. So we do about 3,000 cases right now. That's kind of in our discussion of where are we going, and how far do we go? What does that look like? I say frequently that it's really fun. 5 years ago, if you had asked me what I'd be talking about at this moment, I would have laughed at you. I mean, that's also the exciting moment, but also it comes with some of this is scary, and but it's also really exciting. So I don't know where we're going to be. I know we'll probably be bigger than where we are now. How big, I don't know. I would say that we'll probably not be making wine in here anymore at that crossroads. We're kind of tapped out in terms of space here. I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, I think we're much further along than we ever thought we'd be this soon. So, like Laura said, we're maxed out of space from a production standpoint in the barn, and so the discussions are where do we go from here. And so I think right now we'll just hold tight for a little while and figure out what the next step is, because the next step for us is going to be it'll be a big step because it would require a new facility or to grow, at least when we're talking about just quantity of wine. It would kind of require retooling a bit, and so that's a much bigger like we're kind of like at the ceiling for the space, and so to grow beyond that, I guess I'm just talking in circles because right now we don't know.
I mean, the nice thing, I think, obviously working with your spouse, it can sometimes be hard. But like I think we have this unique skill set where Bryan is really strong, I'm really weak, and where I'm very strong, Bryan's really weak, and so we kind of complement each other. We don't always see eye to eye, but we always are kind of we're generally on the same path. It's just kind of the logistical, that's I think the hardest part we're at right now is where are we going? All really great problems. I know we're very fortunate to be having okay, how do we grow? But with that, it's also the unknown, right? So for us, it's that ignorance and arrogance of what we know now versus when we started. It's like the devil you do know, the devil you don't. So what are the challenges we'll be faced with when we're at that next level? Do we want those a part of our life? Is that something that we want as part of this family business? And so those are really kind of the behind the scenes questions. What does our family unit look like, and what does our day to day look like, and how do we inform and build the life that allows us kind of both of those worlds? I know for me, that's kind of how I look at things. The kids are still small, 6 and 8. But I have hopes that one day they'll be a part of this, but also knowing that they have their own lives too, that they may have no focus in wine whatsoever. Maybe they'll be beer people or whiskey people, I don't know. But it's fun to have seen a lot of the other family wineries go before us and to look at them for best practices, and also to see what's the different avenues and paths people have taken and where they are now.
Is there anything else you're excited to grow or to make? Is there any other varietals you're excited to work with as you look ahead?
That's a good question too. This year we added a new vineyard for Gamay Noir, so we're going to be growing that program a bit. We're going to continue to invest in Chardonnay. So this year we worked with 5 different vineyards for Chardonnay, and we're all in on Chardonnay. So we'll be doing a lot more of that. Varieties outside of that is a good question. I think some interesting things that not a lot of people know are that when we did our first, had our first harvest here in the barn that was not from the property, we did varieties like Cab Franc, Tempranillo, Barbera. Some of those varieties have never seen the light of day outside of the barn. They're bottled and they're just sitting in storage. And when we did the first commercial vintage, we made unique varieties because the thought was there's so many great wineries doing great Pinot Noir and Chardonnay here. It would be really hard as a new brand to break in with Pinot and Chard. And so we started doing all these other varieties that, if you take a look like Tempranillo, we barrel aged that for 3 years. So by the time that wine came out, Hazelfern, we've been super fortunate that now it's kind of become known for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And so now I don't even know, now we don't even know where that will fit. And so we have these weird wines and we just don't know what to do with them. And so that's why I think it's an interesting question, will we do other varieties? So I think we want to keep pretty focused on what we do. Maybe a little expansion with the Gamay, but that makes sense because we grow it. And outside of that, I'm certain that one day we'll have some fun stuff that we want to do, but I don't know if that'll be under the Hazelfern brand or just from I try and think of keeping brand focus and how we deliver, what our customers expect, from this brand. And so where we put that, for our own fun side projects will be a question for another day.
I think the only thing I would love to add to the mix, obviously, would be sparkling. But I think a lot of people say that I drink a lot of it. But that's a whole nother, so that's a whole nother production avenue. So we have kind of been every year we get to harvest and we're is this the year? And then we come back. So maybe this next year we might dabble. So, and I think we would attempt to do it all ourselves, which I know is not can sometimes be uncommon on a very small scale. Very, very small scale. We'll just use our kids to do all the riddling. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not child labor if it's your own kid.
No.
That's totally fine.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned working with your spouse, working together in a family business. Tell me
Yeah.
about that. What's the secret to making that work? You mentioned kind of complementary strengths and weaknesses, but how do you make it work on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis when you're working so closely together?
I think for us, we were really fortunate that we worked together before all of this. And so you can segment work versus personal life. It's also still a learning in progress because it's very different when you work for someone else versus when you work for yourselves. And sort of the buck stops with you, and when you're talking about capital expenditures and growth, and also just figuring out what you both want, which is not just going to a job each day, right? And so when you're talking about growing and we're talking about where we're going, but I think that the core of it is that we worked together before this, and so in a very high stress environment, and so there's a lot of similarities to that here. Agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a funny week to ask that because we are having massive disagreements actually this week.
I'm sorry to bring that back up to the forefront.
It's like,
there.
let's dance around.
This is like therapy.
Yeah, it's there.
But we're having massive disagreements for reasons of like, where are we growing next? Like it's just all of those business challenges, and that all also always bleeds over personal. But like we've always worked together. That's how we know each other. It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. At the core of it, Bryan definitely has more 500-foot view, and he's, probably more, I don't know what the word is for it. He's building something maybe bigger. And for me, I'm always the worrywart. So you kind of have that dynamic. And so that can be hard when you're working with your spouse and everything is a personal decision, because there's so many factors outside of just building a business. When we worked at the agency, it's like you would go to work during the day, and at the end of the day, you can say, this actually isn't for me, and you could go get another job, right? But here, it's that we both love this, and this is our child. And so when you're almost having disagreements, it's like you're talking about your child and how you're parenting it. It's like the same thing. And so you're so emotionally invested in it, and this is so much of who we are and who we've become, and will be the future of our family and our kids, and what is that legacy that, and what is that environment that we're leaving for them. So yeah, it's a funny week
Well, I hope that helped a little bit there by asking that question.
We've worked together for, 16 years. So, it's our child. This is our third child. It's the most expensive
it's
one.
the neediest one.
And the neediest. But it's definitely our child. Bryan's. I think your analogy always is we've parented Hazelfern, and now it's ready to go to college. And so, do we send it to college, or do we just let it, not go to college?
Right, and college is expensive.
Yeah, and so all of these, like I said, it's literally our child.
Absolutely.
So more to come. I don't know where we're going to be. I know it'll be positive wherever we end up, but it's also just really kind of exciting to not know where you're going. Kind of the adventure in that.
Yeah, that's why this is fun to be recording this, because we'll be able to look back and
You'll be like, how did we not know that? Why was that even an issue?
Well, just think if we'd interviewed you in 2009, what that interview would look like now, right?
I know.
So yeah, like you said earlier.
exactly.
So
You guys should come back and
that's the
re-interview.
plan.
Yeah.
The plan is for this to grow like that, and for us to be able to look back in 10, 15 years and see what's happened. So
Yeah.
well, hopefully that'll be something that happens. It may not be me, but someone
Yeah.
will be here to ask you about how things have gone
Yeah.
2034 or something like that.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Well, that's all the questions that I have for you today. Is there
Yeah.
anything we didn't cover that we should have covered? Anything I didn't ask that I should have asked?
Can you think of anything?
I don't think so.
I don't know, for me, I'm really excited about the future of Oregon.
Good.
It's going to be pretty awesome.
Good. Excited to be part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I got nothing.
Well, that's great. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time today,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sharing your stories, sharing some therapy with us. We
Yeah.
appreciate that. We'll go ahead and let you off the hook.